Hello, everybody. Welcome to Coffee with Kelly. Today, my guest is Paul Polk, the Charlotte County Property Assessor. Paul, can you tell us a little bit about you, your background, and how did you become the property assessor?
Well, I'm a Charlotte County native. I'm proud to say that. My family's lived here for multiple generations. So I'm a product of Charlotte County schools. I actually attended Edison Community College in this exact building. So
Oh, wow.
I got some history here. I started my appraisal career back in about 1985,
Okay.
working as a private appraiser, doing fee work for banks.
Oh, okay.
Mostly for loan purposes.
I didn't know that.
I worked part-time, or after that I went and worked for the Sarasota County Property Appraiser's Office, worked there for a couple of years, and then moved on to the Florida Department of Revenue. A lot of people don't realize that the Florida Department of Revenue does oversee all the property appraisers in the state of
Oh,
Florida.
really?
So they have an appraisal division, and I worked for them for quite a while, many different capacities. Then I came to the Charlotte County Property Appraiser's Office in 2010.
Okay, and you've been here ever since.
I've been there ever since. The property appraiser retired. Frank Desgan retired in 2012, and I ran for office when blessed to have been elected property appraiser. So
that was my next question. Are you an elected
I am
position?
an elected official. So our cycle, all the constitutional officers, myself, the sheriff, tax collector, clerk of the court, and supervisor, we're all in the same cycle.
Okay.
So every 4 years we are reelected.
Okay, and when is
Hopefully.
hopefully, and when is the next cycle for you?
2024. So we're on the same
Oh,
cycle.
okay.
We're on the same cycle as the presidential.
Presidents?
Yes.
Ah, okay,
Correct.
very cool, very cool. Well, Paul, in our area, about 7 months ago, we had a catastrophic storm Ian come through our area. What is going on with that? I know that there were a lot of homes are damaged.
Correct.
And now you're in the process of going through and assessing all of the things that happened, all the homes that were damaged.
We're trying to identify right now. I mean, our valuation date is January 1st.
Okay.
So we make a determination of our values as of January 1st and the condition of the property as of January 1st.
Okay.
So since the hurricane, we've been actively, we've reached out to the public. We've put on our website. We've had, articles or, ads in the newspaper. Hey, give us your information. If your property was damaged, please provide us with that information, either photos, insurance information, anything where we can help us do our job to make a determination of the status of that property as of January 1st. We also have high resolution aerial photography that was flown within 2 weeks of the hurricane.
Okay.
So we've been using that, those aerials and comparing the aerials before and after to make a determination of what that condition of that property was. We also had aerials flown again in January. So we really have a before, right after the hurricane, and then a couple months after, closer to our valuation date.
Right.
So we're using that information to make that determination. And for properties we found, Hurricane Ian was so much different as far as the scope and scale compared to Hurricane Charlie.
Right.
I was here during Hurricane Charlie. Saw that destruction throughout the county, but it was pretty,
Charlie was
localized.
a fast storm.
It was a fast-moving storm. It was very localized for the most part. What we saw with Ian, it was widespread.
Yes.
Charlie did not really impact West County that much.
Okay.
Very few homes out there where mobile homes were damaged out there, and Ian is the opposite. I mean, we had a tremendous amount of damage in our West County, Rotunda area,
Yes.
Grove City, a lot of the mobile home parks. We had some of these older mobile homes that had not experienced the, Category 3, 4, 5 hurricane.
Yeah.
And they really, literally destroyed a lot of mobile homes in that part of the county. And we had damage again. It was widespread. It was from West County to South County. It was all over. It was just a scope of the storm. You have 100-mile-an-hour winds for 8 hours, stuff's going to give.
Yes.
So that's made our job challenging, just because of the scale and scope of the storm, to identify those properties, and we're doing our best with that photography. It wasn't realistic for us to try to go door to door and drive these. We'd have never gotten through this. So we're using that aerial photography. We have staff that they've been doing that full time for the past 6 months.
Right.
I think our last count, we'd looked at probably about 50,000 properties in those reviews. And again, it's ongoing, and we're trying to get that information done as quickly as possible. As far as our cycle goes, our valuation date's January 1st.
Right.
June 1st, I have to provide an estimate to the taxing authorities.
Okay.
An estimate of what our valuations may be for this coming year for 2023.
Right.
Then we make our final tax roll submittal to the Florida Department of Revenue by July 1st. So
Okay.
we're kind of under the gun. We're dealing with the damage side of it
Right,
for one thing,
right.
but we're also doing our normal valuations. We've got over 200,000 properties we have to value every year.
Wow.
So we're doing that on top of looking at trying to identify these properties with damage. So we're pretty busy right now.
I bet. I bet.
So we're working some overtime, working some Saturdays, things like that.
So with these properties that are damaged, and they're not livable, do you go in? Are you reevaluating the value on those properties? Do they go down in value? Do they stay the same? What does that look like?
So if the property was destroyed, for instance,
Right.
we have a mobile home that was completely destroyed,
Right.
or even a house is deemed uninhabitable or unlivable as of January 1st, or rendered uninhabitable January 1st, we're going to take those improvements off the tax roll.
Okay.
So there will be just the land value and any of the side improvements, the pool, those type of things. But that
Right.
living area, that home, dwelling was uninhabitable, or commercial buildings in that case.
Right.
That were, because we see some of that along 41.
Yes.
We have some properties, commercial properties that, again, they're gutted. They could not be put to their use. What their intended use was to be a retail store. Well, it's gutted. They
Right.
can't do that at this point. So they'll come off the tax roll for this year, and then we're going to be rechecking these.
And see what happens.
Periodically to see when they come in. And we're also looking at permits. We get all the permanent information from the county or from the city of Punta Gorda. So we monitor that as well to see what that progress will be.
Okay.
But like I tell folks that, Hurricane Charlie, I mean, this isn't a one-year event. I mean,
No.
it's going to, we have stuff that lingers. Again, we see with supply chain issues and just getting, people to come in. We have a lot of folks that are here doing work. But again, it's a long, somebody may be on a waiting list for another 6 months, 8 months to get a contractor in there to do that work to their home. So they may not be in the home January 1, 2024. So again, we've got to try to monitor that within our, from our side of it to see when those properties are be put back on the tax roll.
So I saw you talk at the Board of Realtors, I think about a month ago, and there was a notice on the tax appraiser's website, something that people had to sign up for by a certain date. I think that has passed
That has
now.
passed. That was during the governor called for a special legislative session back in December.
Okay.
And at that point, they provided some property tax relief for properties, again, that were rendered uninhabitable for at least 30 days. And there was an application to be filled out on our website, or they could have come into the office and fill out an application. But that date was April 3rd. The filing deadline for that was April 3rd. We got over 3,000 of those applications. So again, in addition to some of the other stuff we're doing, we're processing those applications.
So anyone who's completed that application, be patient. You're going through this. It will be coming. Yes. But just be patient with your office.
Yeah, so. if they filed that information or filed that with us as of April 3rd, we are again working on those. And what we do is we process the application, make our determination, and then we provide it to the tax collector, who would actually process the actual tax refund. It's a prorated refund for that portion of the year, again, from the hurricane till January 1st.
Right.
And that damage, again, the damage would just be to the dwelling, the single-family home, the mobile home, the condominium, or whatever it was. Again, it wouldn't include the land or any of those other things.
So they're going to get a rebate on what they paid for their property taxes November 1st from September 28th to December 31st.
If it was uninhabitable.
If it was uninhabitable.
For that period of time.
Okay.
And it's just the ad valorem side. It's not the non-ad valorem
yes,
assessments.
And I'm glad you brought that up because one of the things that people, especially people moving to Florida and first-time home buyers, they don't realize when you're looking at a property tax bill, you have the top section, which is your ad valorem, and that covers what? Schools?
Yes, that's your taxing authority. That's your, the county, the city, law enforcement. You have the water management districts, school board. The school board is one of the bigger portions of it. And then, the bottom
half is the non-ad valorem.
Correct.
And that's where sometimes you'll see special assessments.
Correct.
If they've gone through and put sewer in and things like that. Also, PACE loans. I don't know if those are still available, but some people do have them.
Yes.
And you'll see them there. Go ahead.
They, the non-ad valorem side, again, the ad valorem side at the top, that's based on value.
Right.
That's based on the value of your property, the taxable
Yes.
value of your property bounced off the millage rate that's been set by the taxing authorities to get that dollar amount taxes. Now, the non-ad valorem assessment or fees, they are flat fees.
Yes.
So you can be in $1 million house or a $50,000 house. If you're in the same neighborhood, your non-ad valorem assessments are going to be the same.
Right.
They may vary. I mean, the fire assessment may vary based on the number of structures you have on the property. So
really?
There's different criteria for those non-ad valorem assessments. But again, the main thing is they are not based on value.
And the other thing that's confusing when people buy a home is the non-ad valorem is paid in September or October.
Well, they all show up on the trim notice in August.
Correct.
As far as the payment, I mean, it's included in, there is some, there is a difference there and some on the time frame, but that total tax bill that you'll get from the tax collector in November will include both. It will include the non-ad valorems and the ad valorems. So that's your total tax bill.
Because we see sometimes where the buyer has to credit back the seller because they've already paid the ad valorems.
Yeah. The non-ad
valorems. Yes. So you can go out to the website and look at the tax bills. And I know realtors don't like Zillow, but what I like about Zillow is you can go down and you can look at the tax records and you can click see county website and it'll take you to that property's website. And there is a little, I want to say it's an orange box that says tax information, and it takes you to another page and you can see the property taxes. Homesteading. That is a huge thing in this area. And I go through and call my clients in January that bought, hey, did you homestead? Did you homestead? Did you homestead? Because you have till when?
March 1.
March 1 to file this.
Correct.
Can you tell us what this does for people moving into the area or for new home buyers or people that have owned their homes and didn't realize they could do this?
The big thing about the homestead, you get $25,000 value off your school board side.
Okay.
Because again, you have different taxing authorities, and then in 2008, I think legislation was passed or amendment was passed in 2008 to grant an additional $25,000 on the non-school side. So you've got a $50,000 exemption and a $25,000 exemption, depending on that taxing authority. Again, it's just 25 off the non-school side, or excuse me, the school side.
Right.
The big thing, the most important thing, the biggest benefit for the homestead exemption is the cap. There's a 3% cap on assessed value based on the Save Our Homes Amendment that was passed in the early mid-90s.
Okay.
So that is the big benefit of that. So what that means is, so if you buy a home or if you build a home, in the mid-90s, early 90s or whatever, and that's been your homestead primary residence since that point in time, your assessed value has been capped a max of 3% since that time. So as the market and the idea behind this was that folks were getting taxed out of their houses. I mean, that was kind of the thing that, property values are increasing so much.
Right.
You have folks that are on a fixed income. This is their primary residence, and the market value is going up and the taxables are going up. So what happened was, they put this cap in place to try to, to buffer that a little bit so that you didn't see those huge increases in taxes each and every year. Again, your market value is still going to be reflective of the market, but your assessed value is going to be capped at 3% of max.
And this is what happens. People will see the property, they'll buy a home and say it hasn't sold since the 90s. That property tax bill is going to be very small.
Very small.
But what happens after that house is sold?
That is a great question. And let me step back too. Back in that there was other legislation in I think it's 2008 to put a non-homestead 10% cap on assessed value. Again, assessed value.
So for the non-homestead.
So your non-homestead, your non-school, taxing authorities, the assessed value is capped at 10% as well.
Okay.
So you buy the home, you buy that building. So what happens after a change of ownership, Florida law requires that to reset. So just like your example you gave, you cannot look at that prior owner's tax bill.
Correct.
Because and it's a timing thing as well. So you buy a new home, you buy that home in February.
Okay.
So again, our valuation date's January 1st.
Right.
So our ownership was January 1st. So that prior owner owned the property January 1st. They were homesteaded. Well, guess what? You get that tax bill in November that reflects that homestead still.
Right.
So that homestead doesn't come off until the following January.
Correct.
So and that's what happens. People get that first tax bill. Wow, this is great. It's only $1,500. Well, again, change of ownership. Again, that following January 1st, it resets. They get the tax bill the following year, even though they may have homestead.
Correct.
And it may be capped going forward.
Right.
But that's going to be reset. So it's going to be a shocker. Let's just say.
Yes.
And again, that's one of the biggest complaints or questions we get from property owners. Again, they're coming from out of state. They're not aware of Florida tax law, and it can be, shocking.
Yes.
To put it nicely, when they get that new tax bill, and they are really for sure that we've done something wrong, and that something must be wrong. But the realtors do a good job, explaining to them, and it is a disclosure that has to be put out there.
They do.
But still, some people. They don't pay attention to it, or they just, and again, trim notices when they go out, pay attention to them. Don't just,
Yes.
If you get something from our office, we encourage you.
Can you just
look at
explain what the trim notice is for people that don't know what that is
Sure.
or aren't familiar with?
Sure. And the timing of that is usually around mid-August.
Correct.
So again, our valuation date's January 1st. July 1st we submit our tax roll to the Florida Department of Revenue for approval. So it's through an approval process, and then mid-August we mail out a trim notices. It's the truth of millage, notice of proposed tax bill. Again, that's going to be the first look at what your proposed taxes will be for that year.
And it shows different budgets.
Well, exactly. So it's broken down in 3 sections. So you've got the first section is what it was last year.
Yep.
So your value last year was X, the millage rate was this, your taxes were this.
Okay.
I mean, I don't think it gives actual taxes, but it shows what your value was and what your millage rate was the prior year.
Okay.
Then it shows what they call as a rollback rate. So what the rollback rate is for the taxing authority to collect the same amount of money they collected last year, this is what the millage rate would be.
Okay.
So, and then the final column is the proposed.
Okay.
So the taxing authorities have raised their budgets or whatever the case may be, or they're maintaining the same millage rate, but they are going to collect more money.
Okay.
And again, you look at those 3 things, again, what it was last year, what the rollback rate would be, and then what the actual, proposed is. But what happens is, and it happened this year, that, we mailed out the trim notices, mid-August.
Right.
So during the summer, the taxing authorities, I'm just use the county for example, they are working on their budgets. They're finalizing it. So they've got my numbers now. They've got
they get them in June.
So they've got those numbers. They're looking at any funds they're getting from any other sources to fund their budget.
Okay.
So when they get those numbers, they have several different budget hearings, public budget hearing meetings where they discuss their budgets and what their proposed millage rate will be based on that new valuation that our office is providing to them.
Okay.
So what happened this year, we mailed out the trim notices in August. Their final budget hearing is usually not until sometime in September.
Right.
So once they got those budget numbers, they didn't go to the full rollback rate, but they did lower some of the millage rates this year.
Okay.
So that notice of proposed tax bill, the taxes that were on there were actually were more than what the actual final millage rate was and what the final taxes were by those different. I mean, some of the taxing authorities maintained it, kept their millage rate the same. Some lowered them a little bit. And every now and then you'll have one raise them.
So in Charlotte County, so you would have Punta Gorda would have their own millage
Correct.
rate. Who else would have their own rotunda?
No, it just because Rotunda and the other different communities fall under the county.
Under the county.
Under the county. So you have the law enforcement, you have public safety,
Sure.
you have Greater Port Charlotte Lighting District, those type of things that are actually line items on the top part of as taxing authorities, and like I said, the water management districts. We have most of our counties covered by Southwest Florida, Swift Mud, Southwest Florida Water Management District.
Okay.
And then we have a small portion, Babcock Ranch and some of that area out there, that's covered by South Florida Water Management District. So they're individual line item taxing authorities that have their own millage rates, and they have their own budget hearings.
Gotcha.
And the school board as well. School board has their millage. They set their own millage rates. Well, let me take that back. They have two parts of the millage rate for the school board. You have a local portion and you have a state portion.
Okay.
So there's two parts of that, but it shows up as the final, as the total.
Okay. I wanted to ask you, millage rate. Now, you said that this year it went down.
Correct.
What would cause it to go down? More homes being built?
Well, I mean, it's what happened for instance, for 2022, we saw a 17.5% increase in taxable value.
Okay.
So the taxable value that the monies, the starting point that the county or the tax authorities had to work with was 17% higher than it was the year before. So if they'd have maintained the same millage rate as they did the prior year, they would have collected that much more money, as far as taxes.
Okay.
So what they did is they looked at that and said, we had a 17%, and in the past couple of years, it's been averaging anywhere 6.5%, 7%, 8%. 17% increase in taxable value is big. Again, because you got to think that we've got over 60,000 properties that are homesteaded where the assessed value can't go up more than 3%.
Did it go up because these values went up because of the sales in the county?
It's a combination of several things.
Several things.
So in that 17% increase, you're going to have new construction.
Yes.
We put over 2,200 new homes on the tax roll.
Yes.
So that's new house, new $250,000, $300,000 house going on the tax roll for the first time.
Okay.
So that's a big. Those numbers are steadily increasing over the past couple of years. So that's portion of it. The other portion of it, like we talked about before, once there's a sale of a property.
Correct.
That change of ownership. So that property that's been capped, that property that's had a taxable value as $100,000 for the past 15 years because it's been the homestead cap. Now it's reset because that change of ownership. Now it went from $100,000 to $350,000. So that's a big chunk of that as well.
Right.
And then you just have the overall appreciation.
Right.
We saw vacant lots, particularly in some areas, that tripled in value last year.
Wow.
So the lot started out, in January of 2021, at $10,000 in that neighborhood. By the end of the year, they were selling for $27,000 or $28,000 or whatever the case may be. So again, our value has to reflect that January 1st or December 31st, closest to the end of the year date. So that $10,000 sale, we looked at that, but we also had a pile of sales up in that $27,000, $28,000, $30,000 range. So that's what our value is going to be, because that's what, again, when our tax roll is reviewed, looked at by the Department of Revenue, they're going to look at that. So we have to be, those valuations need to be as reflective to January 1st as they can be. So that's one of the big increases. That's why those are the kind of the combination of things that caused that, again, last year, 2022, that big increase in taxable value.
So, Paul, some things I've run into is I'll have a veteran buying a home. And with the homestead, a disabled veteran does not pay property taxes, just the non-ad valorem, not the ad valorem.
There's several different exemptions for veterans, disabled veterans. It depends on what level their disability is.
Correct.
And we have our staff, it works well with the VA, and we know what, we'll ask them to bring in different paperwork, provide that documentation for those different, disabilities. So that's best for them to come into our office and talk to us about that and provide us with that documentation so we can make that, proper, adjustment to that for that exemption.
Right. And one of the questions I get there, I always tell them, you're going to have to pay those property taxes for the first year. You buy it in January, you buy it in July, you buy it until January 1st, like you said. until it gets reevaluated.
Right.
They would need to go down and fill out the paperwork for it.
There was legislation passed, I believe it's 2 years ago now, that kind of that addressed that issue.
Okay.
And I mean, it's not fresh on top of my head, so I can't address it. But there was legislation passed to try to address that gap where they buy the home, in March or April or whatever it may be, and to cover that gap.
So there is something coming into play. Hopefully, that's going to help them
and that's a great question, because those folks are entitled to that exemption, and having that coverage would be helpful.
And if they're getting a mortgage, we're requiring it to escrow.
Correct.
We are going to collect that money, and it's not
at least for the first year.
At least for the first year, until we see that. Well, Paul, I can't believe that our time is up. Oh my gosh. It is just so wonderful talking to you. You have so much good information. One question before you leave.
Yes.
What's the last book you ever read?
Last book I ever read. Actually, I read a Tom Clancy book the other day. I can't remember the name of it. I was down. I had a surgery 3 weeks ago, and I was kind of.
So you got your Clancy fan.
I was reading something. Yeah, it's kind of the post Tom Clancy book. Let's put it that way.
Okay.
I read quite a bit.
That's good.
But yeah.
That's good. Well, thank you again. Thanks for tuning in, everybody. Email me any suggestions for the podcast or any other questions you might have for Paul, and we'll get them over to him. I should say my email address is coffeewithkellypodcast@gmail.com. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.